Right,
Morning
whenever you're ready.
Today I'm
Please.
talking to Robert Crouch. Hiya, Robert. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about yourself and
Donna.
about your books.
Hi, Donna. Thank you. Yeah, I write murder mysteries. They're very much sort of modern day Agatha Christie's. That's how I like to think of them. And I've been very lucky that quite a few people who've read and reviewed have sort of made comparisons with Agatha Christie. So that's quite pleasing because she is one of my favourite authors. So it's really, I write the classic whodunit, but there's no, it's not a police officer and it's not a private investigator. It's just an amateur sleuth. So it's, I mean, we're sort of down the cozy end of the market, but not the, you know, they're not the little lady in a village who bakes cakes or sort of, you know, gossips all the time and picks up stuff like that. My main character, Ken Fisher, is an environmental health officer, which was the profession I was in for nearly 40 years. And environmental health officers, or EHOs, are actually law enforcement officers. So I do have a law enforcement background, though, to be honest, we never used to use the law that much. It's just in exceptional cases or where people, you know, just wouldn't behave themselves. So I've got that sort of understanding of the criminal, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act and stuff like that, which I think hopefully allows me to bring a bit of credibility to what I do. And I've just got a guy who basically, in the very first novel, gets drawn into investigating a death in the workplace, but it's actually a murder disguised as a death, which is why the book's called No Accident. And it's one of those things where the more he investigates, the more he finds things that don't just fit and are not right. And eventually he realizes that what he's actually dealing with is a murder. The trouble is that no one really believes him. So, you know, in the great spirit of all murder mysteries, he goes off and solves it himself, you know. And having solved one murder, in the next book, a family friend asked him if he will try and find a missing wife, and so on. So that's sort of how I got over, you know, an environmental health officer investigating murders, really. I got him sucked in the first place, and then having solved one, he then solves another, and so on. And, you know, we're up to, I think, book 7's coming out in May this year. So he's still going strong, still finding things to stick his nose into and cause a fuss. They're, you know, like I say, they're just what I would call a traditional murder mystery, but set in today's world. I mean, you know, the guy's an environmental health officer. You know, he cares about animals. You know, he's not your typical traumatized cop who's, you know, lost his wife and, you know, his life's almost collapsed, sort of thing, like you read in so many books today. It's like I said, it's really sort of Agatha Christie for today, I hope. You know, I don't want to compare myself to Agatha Christie because she's a much better writer than me, but that's what I aspire to.
Did you always want to be a writer?
Yeah. I tell the story. Well, it's not a story. It's what happened, as far as I know. When I was about 4 years old, I used to nip down to the local newsagent and get my father the Sunday papers. And I used to sit on his lap and look at the paper while he was reading it. And I've no idea whether he was reading the news of the world or what. But unlike most people who would be fascinated by the pictures, I was fascinated by the big headlines. And he taught me to read. When I say read, I mean, you know, I was 4 years old. I couldn't read a book, but I could read newspaper headlines and I could read a little bit. And so when I went to school, I sort of had, I could read to a certain degree. And obviously I learned to read a little bit more at school. And I think by the time I was sort of 6 or 7, I was devouring the Enid Blyton Famous Five series. And all I can remember is that I'd read so many books by the time I went to secondary school. And when we did English in secondary school, we got to write stories, and I loved it. I just absolutely love writing stories. And, you know, without being too immodest, I used to write good stories. I mean, you know, I always got good marks for them. And I think that's because I love writing them. And they were all Famous Five type adventures, really. I mean, I was just regurgitating what I'd read. But yeah, and I wrote my first novel when I was 16 or 17. I wrote it for children because I didn't think I could write a novel for adults because I had no experience of the world at that point. But, you know, it's taken me a long, long time since then to actually get, you know, to the state where I've been published. But, you know, it's always been there. You know, life gets in the way, you know, you get married, set up a home and all that sort of stuff, and other things take priorities. But, you know, here I am now, you know, 7th book. So.
And what made you finally take the plunge and go for it?
I was fortunate enough that I could leave local government where I worked early. You know, if you work for the NHS or local government, the one thing you do have is you might not get paid brilliantly, but you generally get a good pension out of it. So with savings and a pension, I thought, sod it, I'm gonna pack this job in and start writing. And I was getting pretty browned off anyway because government cutbacks and all the usual stuff you've heard about. And I managed a team of environmental health officers. And quite frankly, I mean, you know, I spent most of my time justifying doing my job. And I thought, well, I shouldn't have to justify doing my job. You know, it's not like I'm doing anything wrong. And I thought, no, sod it, I'm going to write this book. And, you know, best thing I ever did, really. But yeah, had I not been able to retire from local government, I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't have tried to take the plunge and live off my earnings from writing. Otherwise, I'd have been back in work again within about 3 weeks. You know, I certainly don't make any money out of it. But then I don't care. I'm doing it because I love doing it. You know.
Yeah.
I think most writers would say that. I'm sure.
They do, yeah. And when you wrote your first book, were you planning on writing a series?
Well, the funny thing is the first book was actually the 3rd book I wrote about this character. So there was, the first book that I wrote was okay, but it wasn't good enough. The second book I wrote did become the second book in the series. It was better. And having written a second book where this guy goes looking for this missing wife, I suddenly thought, people might say, well, how the heck's he got into investigating murders and stuff? So I wrote the first book where he gets sucked into a murder and sort of dovetailed it into the second book. So yeah, so I've written 2 books, so I had the start of a series, and then from then I just thought, well, I'll try another one and so on, you know. You know, like all writers, I've just got ideas, and some ideas, you know, catch light, other ideas don't, you know. And while I can keep it fresh and believable and I keep getting the ideas and I'm enjoying writing it, I shall keep going.
And would you consider writing any other genres or any other series, any spin-offs?
Well, I recently wrote a short story, a crime story for an anthology for charity in another Facebook crime group. And as I was writing this short story with this couple of characters, I thought, actually, this could be another series. Have you heard of a guy called Simon Brett?
Yeah.
He's based in Brighton, down the road from where I am, and he writes a couple of cozy-ish series, one of which is set in a seaside town where there's a female duo, an unlikely female duo who sort of start solving murders and things. And it's sort of a bit more cozy than what I write at the moment. But I thought, you know, I've got this, I've got an idea for the first story, so I may well branch out and try a cozy sort of mystery rather than a murder mystery, you know. But at the moment, I've got to. The characters haven't quite caught fire in my head, if that makes sense. You know, I can sort of see them, but I can't quite. I need to sort of get to the heart of them and what makes them tick. And when I get there and I understand, you know, what really drives them, then yeah, I'll probably be ready to start writing it. So, but yeah, I think I quite like the idea of doing something different as well, because writing about the same character is sort of safe in a way, you know, because you know I've got to know the guy over 7 books and so on. It's writing about the sort of stuff that I know. So it's not easy, but it's safe. And I thought it'd be nice to sort of, you know, branch out a little bit and move into different areas where I've got to do some research, that sort of thing. So, you know, make it a little bit more sort of interesting and challenging.
If you were a character in your books, would you get on with your main character?
That's an interesting one, that is. When the first book was published, all my friends said, "That's you, isn't it? You know, the main character in it." And I went, "Well, not really. You know, I didn't think it was me. He did things I would never have done. But then, having said that, he did things I wanted to do but would never have done because I lost my job." So in a way, I would have got on with him because he was, you know, 85% of him was me. But as the books have gone on, he and I have diverged. He's become, you know, very much his own character, which isn't me. So, but yeah, I would certainly admire his drive and his, you know, his the way he will just not give up and he just keeps going and going until he solves the thing. You know, because that was, I mean, that was one of the things. You know, my wife calls me stubborn. I call it determined. But you know, I never used to give up until I got to where I needed to get to, and you know, so I think we would get on immensely.
And if you, yeah, well, hopefully you get on with yourself then. And if you were to be a character in any of your books, which book would you like to be a character in?
Oh, I don't know. It's funny. I mean, there was this guy we were talking about earlier, this crime scenes officer that I knew. He became a character in the books, and he was a retired crime scenes officer, so he could help Kent Fisher with certain things. He's got contacts and all the rest of it. But he was this really sort of humorous character. You know, he was a sort of larger than life character. You know, lots of witty one-liners, and whatever tragedy used to befall him, he used to bounce back with his great optimism. So I'd probably love to be him. You know, I think he was that sort of person I'd love to be, but never quite managed, you know, in real life, because, you know, it's easy in a book to bounce back from sort of things that go wrong. In real life, it's never quite that simple, you know. So I'd love that. I'd love to be that sort of person who could just always be jolly and smiling and optimistic, and, you know, I think that'd be great.
And what's the most interesting thing you found out when doing research?
Ooh, that's a good question. Do you know? I don't really know. I can't even remember what's in the book I've just written, let alone what's in the other books. In the first book, all I can remember is in the first book, there is a particularly gruesome accident. When I say gruesome, it's not described in any gruesome detail, but I mean, essentially there's a tractor that's used to power a circular saw. So I'll leave it to your imagination what sort of happened. And I'd investigated something similar in real life, but a long time ago. And so I just wrote it. And the book was, I don't know, 4 or 6 weeks from publication. And I suddenly thought, I really ought to check this out. And when I researched it, I found out I was wrong and had to make some very quick last minute adjustments. But it was actually quite fascinating, because what actually would happen was far more intriguing and interesting than what I'd come up with or what I remembered. So that was quite fun. But learning all about things called power takeoffs and how tractors worked and all the rest of it, that was quite enjoyable. But I mean, a lot of what I write about is based on my experiences. For instance, I used to inspect care homes, so I know what care homes are like. I used to inspect hotel kitchens and see all sorts of places I've been in. And I tend to use those sorts of places in the books because it's what I'm familiar with. So I don't generally need to do a massive amount of research, but some of the police stuff's quite interesting. You know, I do, like all writers, if they ever look at my Google search record, they'd probably arrest me on the spot, you know. But yeah, so a lot of the police aspects, you know, because police officers do feature in the books. You know, there is one police officer that's, you know, quite a good friend of Kent. So I mean, I do have to keep up to date with some of the police procedure and things, and you know what happens in courts. I don't, you know, it's silly things like in one book, I wanted to find out how you could declare somebody dead if they went missing, you know. And you sort of think like, oh, well, you must be able to do it because people do it. But until you actually sort of look into it, and I mean, basically, it's a form filling exercise and a lot of, you know, publicity in newspapers and stuff. But I didn't know any of that. I just thought you just went to see a solicitor and that was that, but it's a lot more involved than that. So, you know, there's little things, you know, but nothing huge, you know, nothing great on the forensic line or anything like that. But areas like that, I'm just a little wary of touching them because they're too scientific and it's too easy to get them wrong. And I'd rather get it right than chance my arm and get it wrong.
Do you have anything that you absolutely will never write about?
Yeah. Oh, lots of things. I don't. When I read, it's the same things that I don't like when I'm reading. I don't like torture, especially when it's described. Anything to do with hurting children's just a no-no, full stop. I mean, I know these things happen, but I don't particularly, you know, want to write about. I don't write those sort of books, you know. I would never kill an animal in any of my books because I know readers hate that anyway. But yeah, so animal cruelty and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm sort of in the Morse territory, you know. When you watch Inspector Morse, you know, the murders were all done for a sort of, you know, the murderers were always justified in doing what they did in a strange sort of way, and you know, there was never anything particularly nasty or vicious. You know, there was no serial killers or, you know, people torturing anybody. It was sort of, you know, the safe end of the market, if you like, the cozy end, and that's where I am. You know, the people committing the murders, you know, generally have a, you know, a sort of justifiable reason for doing it. I'm not saying they're right, but you know, you can see the reason for it. And I think, you know, so I don't particularly want to go down, you know, the things like rape and stuff like that, where, you know, or if it happened, it would happen in the past. So you can just mention it in passing and not have to sort of confront it head on. Because I'm trying to entertain people, make them laugh as well, you know, give them something you would watch at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And I'm not trying to write one of these gritty sort of line of duty type things or anything like that. You know, some of the doom and gloom stuff you see on at 9, you know, post 9 o'clock. So, you know, I'm at this sort of entertainment end of the market, I suppose. So anything that's gritty and gruesome, too violent, you know, I don't particularly want to read about it or write about it, to be honest.
If you were to ever be a character in any book in fiction, what book would you like to be in?
Oh, it would, well, without a doubt, I'd be Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. The best book ever written, you know, as far as I'm concerned. You know, there's a man who took on a case he couldn't win and still actually managed to show exactly what happened, even though he didn't win and all that. Yeah, I just love that book, you know, and there's quite a lot of Atticus Finch, I think, in Ken Fisher as well because of that. Yeah. You know, otherwise it would probably be Harry Potter.
A man after my own heart.
Well, no, I mean, it's just great to put spells on people, you know.
Oh yes, that's so much fun. I put a poll up actually on World Book Day on my page, and Harry Potter came out as the top fiction that people wanted to be a character in. So
I'm not surprised. No, I mean, you know, when somebody parks on a grass verge, right, put a spell on them, you know, you could solve so many problems.
Yeah, give them a pig's tail and whatever else they did through the years.
Well, it'd be great for the imagination what you could do to them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would actually. Yeah, lots of fun.
I love this idea of sort of making the punishment fit the crime, you know, so somebody doesn't pick up after their dog, you know, you just shove a load of dog poo through their letterbox or something, you know. But you could do, if you're Harry Potter, you could sort of do it with a little spell or a wave of the wand. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were able to spend a day with an author, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I have to say, we're going back to Harry Potter again here. I have to say, I've got a huge admiration for J.K. Rowling, considering I've not read any of her books. I just love the way she sort of sat in a cafe with a notebook, you know, and having collected her dole money or whatever it was, and just created this wonderful world. And every time I hear her speak, she's just fascinated, you know. And I love the fact that, you know, on Twitter and that, she doesn't bow down to all these people who have a go at her. She fights back, and by Jove, does she come up with some good stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think I think just talking to her, I mean, I could probably spend days with her. She's just an absolute, totally fascinating. Otherwise, it would probably, otherwise it would have to be Agatha Christie. You know, if I could, you know, might need a Ouija board for that one, but yeah, you know, I think how anybody can come up with so many murder books, you know, I mean, I don't know how many years she was writing, but she wrote so many stories, and they're all so good. I just, you know, the quality is amazing, you know, when you consider that she was, and you read those books, and she's got a very direct sort of, not quite conversational, but a very direct way of writing that's quite modern, you know, way ahead of her time, you know. None of this waffling about, you know, what the weather was doing and what somebody was wearing. You know, she just describes it quickly, and, you know, and very heavily sort of dialogue, a lot of dialogue in there as well, much more than, you know, a lot of the books of that era. So I think she was, you know, she'd be fascinating how she just came up with that style and developed that style, and, you know, sort of, and obviously there was the bit where she disappeared, so everybody wants to know what happened there. So that'd be quite fascinating, I'm sure.
Yeah, find out where she went and what she was doing.
She was probably having a holiday.
Yeah, living it up.
Probably got writer's block or something, you know, and decided that the best thing to do would be to disappear.
Yeah, who could blame her? If you were able to go back to an era in history, where would you go back to?
You see, I'm somebody who lives in the here and now and looking forward to what's tomorrow. I suppose it would be the 60s, because I was, you know, I was born in 1959, so I sort of spent my childhood in the 60s. And it was only after the 60s had gone by that I realised what I'd missed, if you see what I mean. So I think it would be quite nice to go back as an adult and actually see what the 60s was really like. Because I think it was probably a time of enormous change and great hope and all the rest of it. I mean, I found the 70s fascinating, but it was all doom and gloom in the 70s, you know, miners' strikes and stuff like that. Whereas I think the 60s was much more sort of, you know, optimistic. And that's what I like. You know, I want to see the positive side of things, you know.
Yeah, I was born in 83, so I'd like to go back and experience the 80s as an adult. More for the music, I think, than anything else, but I was too young to appreciate all the music in the 80s. So I'd want to go back and see Queen and everything in their heyday, David Bowie and Michael Jackson and stuff. So yeah, I totally get that.
You should go back to the 70s, because most of those artists cut their teeth in the 70s, and there was a lot of change in music in the 60s, but there was even more change in the 70s when you actually look at it. You know, there was punk, disco, there's all sorts of stuff going on. And the 80s was great. The early 80s, the new romantic stuff and Duran Duran and all that was brilliant. I loved all that. And then, you know, towards the end of the 80s, it sort of went into house music and stuff. And I think I was just a bit too old for that, really. You know.
Yeah, I was a teenager in like the early 90s, and that was just horrendous. That's not a good era for music.
No, but then again, you know, the 90s gave birth to Oasis, who are one of my favourite bands, so I can't complain about that.
Yeah.
But no, I think it would be fascinating to go back to the era where you were a child, because obviously as a child you would, I don't know how you would see it. You know, my memories are mainly things like school and friends. You didn't see the big world you lived in. You just saw the little world that you were part of. So I think it would be actually fascinating to, you know, in 1969, the first man on the moon. Well, I remember that, but it didn't really make any great impression on me. I was, 10 years old? Like, we landed on the moon, great, you know. Whereas, you know, when you look at it now, you think, wow, you know, the whole of the computer programming to land the shuttle on the moon could fit it on a cassette, you know. Whereas now, look at the power of computers. I mean, it'd just be, you know, like I said, I think, so like you going back to the 80s, I think you'd be quite surprised at the things that you perhaps know about, but didn't fully appreciate as a youngster.
Yeah, just passing by, because, yeah, I was too young to know.
But why would you? You'd be interested in school, your friends, what's for tea, you know, where you were going to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea actually very much.
No, I think everybody should do that. I think it would just be fascinating, and it would probably trigger a lot of memories that you may well have forgotten. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Um, totally forgot what I was going to say then. Have you ever dreamt about your characters?
Ooh, I don't think so. Well, I've woken up in the night and started thinking about them, and it's usually I have a very I don't know how you would describe it. I'm what they call a pantser. You know, I just make it up as I go along. I know that sounds a bit sort of trite, but I genuinely do. So I write, and then the following morning, I'm usually thinking about what I'm going to write that day, following the story on. So I mean, I do occasionally at night wake up, or I mean, it may even be light sleep dreaming, and I am thinking about what's going to happen next, and so on. So yeah, possibly, but normally I would think once I shut my eyes, that's it. I'm out. I'm out for the count.
Nice.
You know. Yeah. No, I mean I get all these good ideas while I'm in the bathroom shaving, so I have to keep dashing back to the study and writing them down because I'm always thinking about what I'm going to write because I write in the morning. So you know, as soon as I've had my breakfast and stuff, I'm sat down at the computer, and that sort of first hour after I wake up is usually thinking time. And like I say, sometimes if it's some of the stuff I write is really complicated. So sometimes maybe I do wake up at night because I'm thinking about it and can't sort of quite work out what to do next. Because when you don't plan things, you don't know what's going to happen next, which to me makes it really exciting to write, and I hope it makes it exciting to read. Because I genuinely, in a lot of cases, don't know what's going to happen because I've only just thought of it that morning. But I don't know, whether it's luck or what. It just seems to work, and I seem to be quite comfortable. The first book I wrote, the first book in the series, I found a Lever Arch file full of notes and stuff I'd written about the book, about the characters and all the rest of it. And when you actually read the book, it bears no resemblance to the plan I made. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, I wrote to this plan, but it bears no resemblance to it. So obviously, even then, I was sort of making it up as I went along. So yes. So the answer is probably yes. I do probably dream about them occasionally.
Have you made friends with lots of other authors?
Online, I have certainly. I mean, I'm hoping when we get back to some sort of normality to meet a couple of them. Where I live in Eastbourne, there's quite a community of authors. You've probably heard of Sheila Bugler. I think she's on the group. I mean, she's a very good writer. I've known her for quite a while, and there's quite a few crime writers knocking about. So we used to have a literary festival. Oh, festival's rather a grand word for it, but a literary sort of weekend, which no longer happens. But so I used to meet quite a few authors, and I've met Ellie Griffiths, Simon Brett. They're Brighton-based authors. So yeah, and the trouble is we all talk the same about the same thing, really. Books. We're all very sad like that.
I spoke to Mark Billingham the other day, and he said he rarely spoke about books and spoke about anything but usually over a beer.
Yeah, like I said, online it's quite different because a lot of it is just through Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. So it's all written. It's little snippets rather than like we're talking now. And it could be about anything online. You can just talk about all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But I think you're interested in the person, so you want to know about the person. But generally, that translates to you want to know about the person behind, and it ends up being the person behind the book, sort of thing, because that's sort of how you know them. You know them as an author, and it's what you do, and it's a sort of not safe territory, but it's a mutual understanding, And all authors have sort of fascinating little stories to tell, I think. Well, I hope so. Most of the ones I've met do. So.
Yeah, most of you are sort of mental in your own way, but lovely and really funny generally. So it's always fun to talk to you.
Well, I mean, this is going to sound, I don't know if it does sound crazy or not. I always wanted to solve a murder. I mean, and I think this goes back to when I was about 11 or 12 or something like that. And somebody said to me, well, why didn't you join the police? And I didn't fancy it, to be quite honest. It didn't appeal to me at all. And I don't think I would have passed the fitness thing at the time. And that's sort of now shown itself in writing murders, murder mysteries. I sort of get to solve murders that way. And, it's just sort of, it's funny how sort of sometimes what's in your imagination ends up becoming reality, because I think a lot of those sort of ideas that swim around in your head often sort of end up affecting your behavior and what you do and what you think about. People sort of say, oh, I never knew what I wanted to do when I left school. I think probably people do know what they wanted to do. They just haven't realized it. They just haven't sort of tapped into it in some way. And I always wanted to write stories, but it never occurred to me to be an author, if that makes sense. Because anybody can write stories. You just got to sit down with a pen or a typewriter and write a story. But to be an author is quite you have to be quite disciplined, all the rest of it. And that's the bit I had to learn. I had to learn to become an author. And I'd been writing for many, many years before I actually suddenly realized that if I wanted to become an author, I had to up my game a little bit,
And do you get a lot of feedback from readers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like more. I'd like more readers and I'd like more feedback. But I don't know whether other authors are the same. I'm my own worst critic, in the sense that, I will write something and I will go, I'm not sure about that. And everybody goes, oh, it's brilliant, Rob. Oh, it's really funny. Or it's really great. Oh, I'd never have guessed that. And I'm thinking, and I don't know if that's sort of not perfectionism, but it's just, I suppose you don't want to sit there and think, oh, that's really good. And then people just say, who wrote that? So I suppose I'm just, I just don't realize sometimes, I don't know what it's like to read my books. I read my books, but I'm reading them looking for mistakes, looking to improve them. Or I'm not reading them, to enjoy them as a story. I did actually try doing that recently. I tried reading one of my first book as a reader rather than a writer, and that lasted all of about 3 chapters, because by the end of 3 chapters, I found out I could have improved each one considerably. So I am totally reliant on readers, and I mean, this is what I'm saying. They say a lot of nice things. Occasionally, you get a bad review, but hey, can't please everyone. I don't try and please everyone. I just write the sort of books I want to read, and I hope that the people who read them enjoy them for the same reasons that I do when I write them. I just want to write something that's sort of entertaining, a bit of humor in there, has a nice, exciting finish, good old battle on the cliff tops and all that sort of stuff, But yeah, the people who read, who come back, generally like it. I asked a question recently whether my environmental health officer should set up as a private detective, which would give me more opportunities to take him in a new direction, shall we say. And, it's amazing the feedback I got. There's one side saying, oh, no, we love the environmental health, finding out about that sort of thing. And there was another side that says, oh, yeah, go on, give me something, give me a new challenge, So, yeah, most of the people generally who read it seem to like it, or the ones who say anything. So I can't really ask for more than that, But if somebody does pick up a point or makes a point about something, you take it on board, because somebody said that in the first book, my character lies too easily, if that makes sense. And I thought, I'd never really thought of it like that. I thought of it as being creative. Because I used to lie a lot to my boss.
Yeah.
Tell him what he needed to know, So I suppose that's, but it's just interesting. I thought that had never occurred to me, because to me that was a sort of a natural thing you did at work, So, the odd reality check, so they're always welcome.
Yeah, something that crops up all the time when I speak to authors is imposter syndrome. So every single author.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
thinking that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder one day and go, actually, no, this isn't, you're in the wrong job, or this isn't happening, sort of thing. But you're not really an author.
When my first book came out, the first book was actually published by a publisher, an American publisher. And I can remember the day. It came out on June the 23rd, I think, in 2016. And my wife came in and said, look, there it is. It's on Amazon, get excited. And I was just worried that somebody would read it and immediately say, that would never happen in a million years. I was paranoid about that people would find fault with it. And, some of the things, like I said to you, I didn't get the tractor bit right to start with, but I did manage to correct it just in time. And I think that's what made me very sensitive. And I still do. I'm always worried that somebody will come along and point out something so obviously simple that I'd missed. I look a bit of an idiot, but
yeah.
Touch wood.
What's been your favourite moment as being an author so far?
Gosh, it's so many, I suppose. I think my favourite moment, if you imagine that the first two books in my series were written at the turn of the millennium, so that's 19, 20 years ago, and the first one wasn't published till 2016, which is a long time, for to get to that stage. When I wrote the third book, that was the first new Kent Fisher book I'd written for basically 19 years, and it was, I suppose it's like a lot of authors call second book syndrome. You always wonder whether you can repeat what you did before. And when I'd finished the book, I was genuinely thrilled with what I'd written, because it was also a little bit different from the first two, and it was written on the hoof. I just made it up as I went along, and I was just so delighted with it. It's still probably my favourite of the books I've written. It's not the best, but it's still my favourite, because I suppose in a way it confirmed that I was an author.
Yeah.
Like I was saying earlier, finally, like I could actually say, yes, I am actually an author now. I can do it. I can write books, which sounds crazy when it was the third book, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
I hope that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, but I don't generally get excited when the books come out, because I've written and edited them so much that I'm almost, I won't say sick of the sight of them, that'd be wrong, because I'm not. I just know them so well, I just want people to enjoy them, and if they enjoy them, then I'm happy. But I don't sort of get excited about this book's coming out tomorrow. I suppose if somebody nominated me for a crime writer's dagger or something, I might get excited. I don't know.
Yeah. And what's your ultimate dream?
I would love the series to be on TV, because it is, a lot of people have said it would make a great TV thing, because the way it's written, it is actually quite visual. Everybody says this, it's a very visual thing when you read it, it's, and I think in a way, I do sort of write it for the TV, if that makes sense. It's not a script. It's not just masses of dialogue and nothing else. But I think I do sort of imagine it being on the TV screen, and like lots of authors, I can have imaginary conversations with my characters, but I can actually sort of picture the setting. I can almost see it on a screen, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my dream, to have somebody come along and say, Rob, we want to put your stories on telly.
And do you have any idea of who you'd like to play your main characters?
Oh, no idea. When I started writing the books, I deliberately didn't describe the main character, because I wanted people, because reading is about engaging the emotions and the imagination. I wanted people to picture their own Kent Fisher. Everybody could have their own version of it, and that's the trouble with the TV. I don't know if you know, Peter James's first book's coming on the screen and end of this month, I think, Dead Simple. And the biggest criticism there's been is that the guy who's playing Inspector Grace is not how people imagined him from reading the books. And I have to say, he's not the person I would have imagined. But at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and I'm sure he's going to be brilliant. So I just thought, well, I don't describe it. So you can read the book and picture who you want, and so on. Somebody else can read it and picture who they want. So all you know about him is he's got dark eyes and dark hair. I think and that's what other people mentioning. So other than that, if you want Tom Cruise, you can have Tom Cruise, He might not have worked as Jack Reacher, but he might work as Ken Fisher. I don't know, apart from the fact he's American.
What's your most embarrassing story?
Oh, heck. Okay. This is making me I'm wincing just thinking about it. Many years ago, I had to inspect a farm where they were making goat's cheese, and I went with a colleague to inspect this place because we had to license them. That was part of the European legislation. They had to meet a very high standard, and I'd sort of known these two people, and I at one point I said to the lady, I said, "Oh, I see, congratulations are in order," thinking she was pregnant, and she wasn't. And the proverbial, "I wish the ground would open up and swallow me up." Yes. The trouble is, I had to go back and inspect the place when they'd done the works, and
dear.
Red go. But yes. That was a case of, I shouldn't really have said what I said. I think everything went quiet, and I just needed to say something to fill the silence, and I thought the worst thing possible. Yes, that makes me cringe just even thinking about that.
Yeah, that's quite common anyway, I think, isn't it? It's one of those things.
Well, I hope other people have done it. That makes me feel better.
Well, usually
make the same mistake.
Usually when I ask guys that question, it involves nakedness of some description. So the fact that it doesn't makes you different anyway.
Yes. I think I've probably spent most of my life trying not to be embarrassing, yes.
Yeah. I just every day, probably. So I don't.
I think you've got to laugh at yourself. There's no two ways about that. But I think, given the choice, I'd rather avoid embarrassing situations like that than laugh at them afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Same, actually. And if you were to invite 4 famous people to a dinner party, who would you invite?
Ooh. Now, here we go. In no particular order, Carrie Fisher. I've got a thing about her, so and she also is how Ken Fisher got his surname.
Okay.
No, this sounds crazy. Well, I don't know if it sounds crazy, but I was just sitting there thinking about when I was trying to create a name for the character, and it suddenly occurred to me that if he was called Fisher, he could fantasize about Carrie Fisher and imagine he was married to her without her having to change her name. So that's. But I think she was a fascinating character. A very troubled life and all the rest of it. So, and a very good actress as well. Have you heard of Sue Grafton?
Oh yes,
the Alphabet Murders.
Yeah, but she only got to Y.
A's for alibi, B's for burglar.
Yeah, love those books.
I've read every one of them, and I love every one of them. And
me too, yeah.
And Ken Fisher often refers to spending the night with Kinsey Malone, the main detective, meaning he's going to read one of her books, But I was very lucky that I had a messenger conversation with the author over about a year.
Oh, wow.
She died, I think she died 2 or 3 years ago, before she finished writing Z. She got to Y and, unfortunately didn't quite make it. And it was quite fascinating doing this messenger conversation with her, asking her about, what inspired her. And she absolutely hated writing the books to some extent because she found it so difficult to do. And she said, it used to take her a long time to write the books and get them to the standard she wanted. And she sort of felt it was a bit like torture. And I suspect what she meant was she wished she'd never started writing the Alphabet series because you committed to writing 26. Now, Muggins here, being the big fan of Sue Grafton, decided that No Accident was an A, No Bodies, the second book, was a B, and thought, I could do this. And then I suddenly thought, do I really want to commit to 26 books? So yeah, I'd invite her, and because she was quite fascinating. I mean, her favourite author was Elmore Leonard, who has these 10 rules of writing, which are absolutely fascinating. You know, never start with the weather and things like that. So she would be great. I'm a huge fan of Elton John, so I think, you know, he would be the life and soul of the party, and I bet he can throw a party as well. So definitely have to meet that man. I read his autobiography recently, and I mean, it's funny, and some of the things he's. I mean, I'm amazed he's still alive or still standing, as he would say. Who else? I think probably it would be, like I said earlier. I think it probably would be J.K. Rowling, because I think, you know, I'm just fascinated by her struggle and how you would handle going from sort of, you know, claiming benefits to suddenly being a multi-millionaire. I mean, how the heck do you? I just can't imagine that. It'd be
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating to how she stayed so grounded. You know, what a woman.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I've read the first few Harry Potter books. I read to think what 10 or more times. I love them. And
Mm.
I read them as an adult and I don't care. and her series that she done, Robert Galbraith, I've read those
Mm.
as well, and they're just as brilliant. So yeah,
Yeah, I
to
must
go
admit, I've shied away from. I watched Harry Potter and, you know, the films, and I didn't feel like I could read the books. I've watched a couple of Cormoran Strikes, but I know the books are quite long. One of these days, I will get around to reading them, because I'm sure they're very good. Because I just can't believe she would do anything that wasn't good, you know, or well, more than good.
yeah, I mean, there's the old thing about the films are never as good, and the films are brilliant, but it's just the world she creates. You
Mm.
really genuinely get lost in this world of, you know, magic and stuff, and that's what makes them special. I think it really is amazing how even from the first one you just completely engrossed in this crazy world.
But that's the point, isn't it? I mean, all books should create a sort of alternative reality, if you like. I mean, fiction is a semblance of reality. You know, it should appear real, but it's a separate world. I mean, the world in my books doesn't exist really, but it could exist. That's the point, you know. And to create a world that's like a parallel dimension almost, you know, it's just amazing. The imagination, you know, Quidditch. Where does all that? I'd love to know where all the ideas for these things came from. You know, it'd be brilliant, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, oh yeah, I absolutely agree. um what would those closest to you say your worst habits are?
Stubbornness. I think I'm always right. I think I am, but you know, no. I, I don't know. I'm a Saki whatnot. That's the trouble. You know, some people are amazed I'm still alive. You know, I mean, I can remember being at school. I was always the cheeky one in the class. You know, I was always the one who got pulled out of the class by his ear. You know, like tugged out, and when you were allowed to do things like that as a teacher. And I was very lippy, but I mean, you know, and very sarky. But there's never any malice involved. It's just, you know, I just like cracking jokes and making people laugh and that. And you know, sometimes you risk overstepping the mark and pushing it a bit too far. But you know, and I suppose that's you know, if you've been on the wrong end of one of my quips or remarks like that, then I suppose you might feel a bit hard done to. I don't know, but you know, I like people who give as good as they get. You know, if somebody can come back with a better one, I'm delighted. You know, but yeah, I think probably I'm a bit too cheeky for my own good.
Yes, I have been accused of this as well,
I
which
don't
is
think there's
fine.
anything wrong with it. It's quite, to
No,
me, that's part of being creative.
yeah,
Because
except when you work in retail.
oh yeah, yeah, but
Yeah,
then
then you
you
pretty much daily get at the risk of getting fired. So
yeah, I think, was it Carolina Hearn in the Fast Show did that character where somebody was shopping and she used to comment on what the person was buying, and you know, some really quite cutting remarks. And I just think it'd be lovely to just be stood in a queue and have a cashier that did that. That would be brilliant.
yeah, I'm that cashier, but I'm not that
Yeah.
bad. But
Well,
with
I'll come to
regulars,
your
I will
till
say,
anytime.
yeah. But yeah, the regulars, once they got used to me, they started giving back as well. And I'm like, I've been found out. But it's
Well,
fun.
I just love it when that happens because, you know, it's escapism, isn't it? It's just a bit of fun. It's trying to break up the monotony of the day, that sort of thing. And when you write, writing's quite a solitary process. So in a way, I don't get to do that so much these days. When I used to be at work, there's loads of people you can sort of bounce off, and I miss that. But I try and do it through the characters a little bit. You know, I mean, Kent is can be quite a sarky whatnot when he wants to be. You know, and that's part of the humour of him. But yeah, I do miss that. I do miss having those people around to sort of, you know, bounce off.
What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Um, I'm really getting into photography at the moment. I have to say, I got a new camera before Christmas, and I'm becoming quite a nerd. You know, getting into, you know, you start talking the language of, you know, with other people who like cameras, and you know, so I'm becoming that dreaded sort of geeky sort of character. But yeah, I think I love photography for the same reason I love writing. It's a chance to use your imagination, you know, to capture things you see. And I've got this great plan to sort of go around the South Downs, which are just up the road from where I live, and photograph all the settings for the books, you know, because I think people would be quite interested in that. And also, a lot of that I've done from memory, you know, because you know, I've trundled into little villages and I've thought, oh, I didn't realise that was there, you know. And you sort of think like, well, anybody describing that village, that's the first thing they'd mention, you know, if they went through it, and you haven't mentioned it. So it's sort of part busman's holiday and part sort of quite interesting to sort of look at somewhere through a lens rather than through the imagination of an author, you know. And the other thing I love doing is I love running because, you know, I'm one of them. I gave up smoking 15 years ago and decided I would get fit and healthy. So, you know, I enjoy running. So I'm a bit like that about running, you know, not quite obsessional, but, you know, come rain, wind, shine, I'm out there. And I often sort problems out with the stories when I'm out running as well. If I'm running on my own. I remember I wrote the first paragraph of a book while I was out running, and I had to keep repeating it to myself all the way around so I wouldn't forget it by the time I got home. I got home, had a shower, came out of the shower, and guess what? I'd forgotten it. So
You
I
need
do
to
use a bit of plotting time.
you need a dictaphone or something and a whiteboard in the when you're shaving so you can write all this stuff down you don't forget.
You know, it would be so easy to put a notebook in the bathroom, wouldn't it? Do you think I've done that? I've actually got 16 notebooks on the go. Can you believe that? Not one of them's in the bathroom.
I have about 200 notebooks and I don't use them. They're too pretty. They're staying. Such a girl thing.
I tried to keep a journal once and it lasted about 3 days, you know, and one of the reasons is that whenever I sat down to think what had happened that day, I couldn't remember. And I don't know whether I've just got some sort of short memory span. I think it's more the fact that I'm always thinking of other things, you know, my mind never stops thinking. And whether it's not just about books and stuff, it's just about anything really. And I think that's the trouble, you know. I need to stop thinking and write some of these things down a bit more. But then, you know, you can, often what seems like a good idea at sort of 8 in the morning, when you actually write it, turns out to be anything but. So you just never know. And that's why I suppose, you know, the brain never stops. It's, you know, I think the brain's designed to have information fed in, and the more information, the better. And then somewhere along the way, something sensible comes out. It may be a couple of weeks down the line, but well, I can't think of any other reason why my books actually work, because as I don't really, you know, I just tend to throw in complication after complication, and then at some point I think, well, I better start solving this, you know. And I think that's what it is. It's just chucking stuff in the brain. The trouble is that what you chuck in seems, you know, there's only so much you can hold, I think. So every time you chuck something new in, something old probably gets forgotten. You know, as with this paragraph when I was running.
I'm sure it created something much better when you eventually came to write it, so that's fine.
Well, I hope so. I'll never know, as I can't remember what it was.
So what's coming next for you?
Well, I've got the seventh book's coming out in May. I've just started the first edit, so that's going to occupy me for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then it goes off to have a professional editor to give me a cold, distanced look at it, and then there'll be a bit more editing. I've got this other possible series that I'm thinking about. I've also got Ken Fisher Book 8. I know the start of the story for that, and I can't say any more than that because, like I say, I won't know what happens until I write the start and then take it from there, sort of thing. But yeah, I'm torn between whether to play safe and write Ken Fisher 8 or take a chance and go for something new. Stretch myself a bit. I think that would probably do me good to stretch myself and create some new characters, and I don't know. I'm just worried that it'll, if I'm not careful, I won't write another Ken Fisher because I'll get wrapped up in this new series or something. Because I know, like Val McDermid, for instance, she has about 4 or 5 different series on the go, and quite a lot of authors do that. So I thought, well, other people can do it. Why can't I? But that's what bothers me. I just think, like, if I get really absorbed in the new series, I might write 5 books of that, and then somebody might say, well, are you ever going to write another Ken Fisher, Rob?
Yes, we're very demanding, us crime readers.
Well, that's it. And the other thing is that, I publish myself now. One of the joys of that is that, I don't have to wait 6 months for the first book. I remember 2 things. One, that the publisher didn't see the book the way I saw it, which is, it's not a criticism. I mean, they see it as an entity, something to sell. To me, it's something I created. Not quite my baby, but it's something I created, and I sort of saw it going in a different direction. But the second thing was how long it all took to actually get the book out. But then, I wasn't the only author they were publishing. They had a whole host of people, so it will take time. And then you sort of come across readers who've got a voracious appetite when they like a series, and so publishing myself, I can get it down to about 8-9 months now, rather than a year. 18 months, that if I was being published. So hopefully I can satisfy that appetite. But that's the other thing. If I write something different, the hope is that all the people who read Ken Fisher will want to read the new series. But if it's quite different, you don't know, So like I said, this is my sort of, it's hardly the same as dealing with COVID and stuff like that, proper real world problems. But that's what's occupy my thoughts at the moment. Do I take a step into the unknown, or do I just carry on with what I'm comfortable with? I think I'd like to take a chance. Well, you don't know until you do you? You don't know what you're capable of until you try it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think I have any more questions for you, unless you think there's anything that I haven't asked you that you want to tell us.
No, it's been great. There's some great questions. I mean, 1 or 2 sort of like, it's the trouble is you never quite know. I mean, I've done talks and all that sort of thing, so I sort of know the sort of questions people ask, generally. But just when you think you know the questions are, people ask you something else, and you think, well, why has nobody ever asked me that before, sort of thing. You've asked a couple tonight where I haven't really sort of thought, oh, I've never even thought about that. Somebody asked me how I write a book, and I thought, I don't know, just do it. If I knew that I could write a book on how to write a book, which I can't. And, where do you get your inspiration from? As I said to you, these ideas are everywhere. They're just going on in your head all the time and stuff like that. You asked me, would I get on with the main character, which is the sort of way of saying how much of me is in the real character, I suppose, the fictional character. I don't know. I never really think about those sort of things. I'm more concerned about does that strand of the plot work? Can people believe that? Is it actually likely to happen? Have I missed something blindingly obvious here? That's what tends to occupy me. And then you go and do a talk, and people say, "Well, what's your book about?" Oh, well, it's a murder mystery. I'm getting a bit better at answering that one now. So yeah, but. It's just fascinating what people are interested in. I don't think I'll ever cease to be fascinated by what people ask, the questions they ask, and some of the things you read on social media, you think like, wow, never thought about that before. It's great to know what readers are interested in.
Yeah.
They see the person behind the book, don't they? I suppose.
Yeah, well, you're our rock stars, so we want to get to know you as much as we'd want to get to know Ed Sheeran or someone like that.
Well, thank you for comparing me to a rock star and Ed Sheeran. I shall sleep happy tonight. But yeah, no. But I'm a reader as well, and I'm as you know, I'm fascinated by J.K. Rowling and all sorts. So yeah, it was just the same, I suppose. But I never translate that reader fascination, turn it on myself, if you see what I mean. But why would I?
Yeah, well, you should.
Yeah.
People want to know.
Might be able to answer the questions better, yeah.
I'd think of something more tricksy to ask you next time if you got too good at answering them.
No more embarrassing moments, please.
I love that question. I've got to have some fun as well.
I was going to say, you could probably write a book of that, Author's Confessions,
Oh, yes, it would be lots of fun. Yeah, some of them have been very good, actually. So,
well,
yeah.
I have a whole host of sort of humorous environmental health stories, some of which, though, you can't really tell without having to explain about the job so that it would then make sense to somebody. And that sort of rather spoils the flow. Other things, I mean, just something straight off the top of my head. We had a problem with a school that got its water supply not from the mains but from a spring, and it was contaminated with bacteria, and it took us something like 15 months to actually get decent water coming out of the taps, that wasn't going to sort of hurt anybody. And on the day we got, I think it was, we wanted 3 negative results, in other words 3 results that say the quality's good. And on the 3rd day I decided to drive up to the school to tell them, and I turned up just as they were in the middle of assembly. And the headmaster saw me at the back and he waved me forward, and he sort of looked at me and went, I said, yes, put thumbs up, yeah, it is. And he pulled me on stage and he said, boys and girls, I'd like you to meet the man who's just passed all our water. And then he didn't understand why the kids all burst out laughing. And you sort of think, like, that's something from a sitcom. That's an easy one to tell, but some of the other stuff's a bit far more complicated,
Yeah, same as working in retail. I think there's so many funny things, so many stupid things, but only in context. Out of context, people are just like, okay.
Some things don't translate when you tell them. It's almost like you had to be there, doesn't it? So yeah, but yes, embarrassing moments. I'm sure everybody's got something they'd rather forget.
Oh yeah, only one person so far has not had anything. So
do we think they were lying?
I mean, everybody's got something, but he's one of like the authors that I get on with best as well. So, but yeah, he really reckons he's got nothing. So,
well,
yeah,
lucky fella.
Yeah, he lives in Burgess Hill as well, actually. So it's not even that far from from you.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who that would be.
Duncan Brockwell.
Who?
Duncan Brockwell.
No, I'm sorry, I've never heard of the bloke. You'll have to forgive me for that if he's watching.
Yeah, he's he writes quite gritty crime, and
that may be why I don't know him, because as I said to you right at the beginning, I'm not a great fan of the gritty stuff.
He's written a cozy, not a mystery. It's kind of it's a bit of a magical, I don't know how to describe it, feel good story that's coming out on the 19th. So yeah, he writes all sorts. Very strange imagination.
Yeah, I don't avoid books that are gritty, but I sort of prefer private eye novels, because the police have got forensics, they've got DNA, they've got labs, all this sort of stuff, teams of officers to solve murders, but a private detective is pretty much on their own in using their initiative. And I think that to me is much more of a sort of challenge, if you like. So in a way, that's why I sort of, I do read police procedurals. I love Peter James, for instance, but I do like the sort of amateur sleuth and the private eye, because I think they have to solve it using their sort of intellect and other sort of things. They can't rely on forensics and sort of that sort of evidence. But So I'm sort of a little bit focused in my reading for that reason, but you know, I do like to try new authors. I'm sure we all do, like all readers,
Yeah.
So I'll look out for the name. Yeah. Thank you.
You just have to look at my page from Monday. You'll see it everywhere because I'm helping advertise his new book, so you won't be able to get away from it.
Yeah. No, I know I do look at the page, not as much as I'd like to, but then I suddenly realised the other week how many crime groups and things I'm a member of. It's just ridiculous. There's so many, and they're all sort of different in their own little ways. But
Yeah.
it just shows there's a big appetite for the stuff out there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, a massive. Even I did it. I mean, at this time last year, I didn't know about many of them or any of them. I don't think. I never thought to look on Facebook for book clubs and stuff. I mean, I've read since I was a child as well, but only in the last year I was like, oh, there's loads of other people that are the same. Wow. And now here I am doing this.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at sort of the sort of sales figures that some of the big names get, and it's I think crime is the biggest selling genre now. It's overtaken romance. And certainly looking at the TV, there are more crime dramas than there seem to be anything else being made these days. So it just shows you that there is a big appetite for it. And I wouldn't know why, unless, I mean, people have always wanted to solve murders. I know that, people love playing detective and trying to beat the guy on the telly to the solution. But, I don't know, maybe just people are just fascinated by, I mean, people like horror stories and things, and I never quite understand why, but, it's just, I suppose it's just some sort of escapism, just chance to be scared. It's just a sort of intellectual way of riding a roller coaster, I suppose. I don't know. And like I said, for somebody who always wanted to solve a murder, it's given me a chance to do it in fiction. So next best thing.
Yeah. So before we sign off, do you want to tell everyone where they can find out more about you?
Well, my website is just very simply robertcrouch.co.uk. All the books and everything else are on there. And if you just put Robert Crouch author into Amazon, you'll get my author page, and all the books are there again. And I'm on Facebook as Robert Crouch author, very original. But yeah, I mean, I do post quite a lot of reviews on British crime fiction, books I've read. So, I mean, people will, if you just click on it, if you click on the review, it takes you to my website where the review is. And, from there, you can actually navigate to the homepage and take a look at what I do, I don't know, what I write won't be to everyone's taste, but,
Well, I'll be checking out one of your books. I'll add it onto my crazy TBR.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like everything else. I think, I don't know about you, you do need to start at the beginning of a series. I find that for nearly all. There's only one author where I haven't found that, which is Anne Cleeves' Vera series. I've read them completely out of order, and it doesn't seem to make a iota of difference. I enjoy them all anyway. But in mine, there is a big backstory that continue, the characters in the backstory continue and change and develop throughout the series. They all do. People come and go, relationships, all that sort of stuff. Because I hope people are interested in that as well as solving the murders, So, yeah. There's lots more about that on the website, and I have an author page on Facebook where I just tend to post mainly my photographs now that I'm getting into this photography. But I'm hoping, once we're allowed to get out and travel a little bit further, I can start putting photographs of the settings and the places and telling a little bit more of a story about them, because people are, a lot of people seem to be interested in that. So, it's nice for people to see something that was in a book, where it was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's all I have, I think. Unless there's anything else.
A very long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Anyway,
Cool.
thank you ever so much. It's been delightful. It's been great to talk to you.
You
And
too.
I appreciate the chance to, come and talk to you, and hopefully I won't bore the pants off people if they watch this. So,
I'm sure you will.
well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.